25th, and ahead of its release date, they've been actually going into a lot of problems between both Marvel Studios and the Walt Disney Company, between the test screenings labeled as lackluster, and the reshoots labeled as problematic. There's been a lot of pushback going against this film as well.
And is this possibly the last time that you're Captain America?
It is.
Bob Iger makes 400 times what his lowest worker is. And I think that's a shame, Bob.
Wait. So these are 6 woke points that are all in this movie, which makes this movie fully woke. It's not just like one thing. They were like, yeah, they did this, but no, it's fully there.
Now at a juncture where I can say no. I don't want to make another.
No. I don't know. Does anyone want me to do it again?
Let me explain. So even like before the event started, the communication was horrible. Nobody knew if you needed a ticket because there was a site that gave out tickets, but nobody confirmed it.
Asked me to do a season 2, and they offered me half the money. I'm like, wow, it's going to take me twice the amount of work for half the amount of money.
Black Widow star Scarlett Johansson is now suing Disney.
Natalie AI thing seems utterly preposterous and ridiculous, and even for an MCU show, I'm finding it to be a little bit of a bridge too far to go. The heist crew, all lame. Every single one of them, all lame.
The latest update proves what insiders have been whispering all year. Disney is unraveling from within. Marvel's brightest stars have signed onto a Star Wars deal valued at nearly $700 million, and the betrayal has left Marvel Studios in chaos. Brie Larson, Pratt, and Sebastian Stan, actors once marketed as the backbone of Phase 6, are now preparing to lead the next Star Wars trilogy. And what makes this so shocking is that the betrayal didn't come from Warner Brothers, Amazon, or Netflix. It came from Lucasfilm, Disney's own sibling studio. Bob Iger himself signed off on the raid, desperate to stabilize Star Wars after Rise of Skywalker underperformed and multiple projects were scrapped. Kevin Feige, the architect of the MCU, wasn't even told until the ink was dry. The fallout is massive. Scripts for Marvel Phase 6 have already been delayed. At least 2 projects are rumored to be shelved entirely. And fans are noticing. Avengers Campus theme park attendance is thinning out, while Star Wars: Galaxy's Edge continues to draw crowds. Toy sales for post-Endgame Marvel heroes have dropped by nearly 40%, while leaked Star Wars prototypes featuring Larson and Stan are already generating buzz online. And well, this is not happening in a vacuum. Disney is still reeling from Snow White's disastrous box office, its flatlining stock, and growing backlash against its corporate treatment of talent. This $700 million Star Wars deal isn't just a contract, it's a coup. Marvel has been betrayed by its own parent company, and the empire that once looked unstoppable now appears divided and vulnerable. The most shocking part of this $700 million betrayal is that it wasn't a sudden ambush. It was engineered years ago, buried inside Marvel's own contracts. Back in 2019, after the global success of Avengers Endgame, Disney quietly introduced what they called an integration clause. On paper, it seemed harmless. It allowed Marvel actors to appear in other Disney-owned franchises, like Star Wars, if the financial terms of the new project outweighed the residuals owed by Marvel. Nobody thought twice about it at the time. After all, the MCU was at its peak, and no actor in their right mind would abandon it. But insiders now say that clause acted like a Trojan horse. Lucasfilm saw the opening and began approaching Marvel veterans as early as 2023. They pitched not just roles, but creative freedom, producer credits, script input, and merchandising bonuses. This wasn't about a cameo, it was about building a new Star Wars era on the backs of proven box office titans. Here's where the betrayal sharpens. According to reports, Bob Iger himself signed off on Lucasfilm's negotiations, fully aware that the actors were under Marvel contracts. Kevin Feige, the very architect of the MCU, wasn't told until the deals were finalized. To many insiders, that wasn't just poor communication, it was sabotage. Because in one move, Disney effectively told its crown jewel franchise that it was expendable. And well, the fallout was immediate. Brie Larson signed on for $15 million plus profit participation. Sebastian Stan secured an $80 million deal with a co-producer credit. Pratt landed close to $95 million across 3 films. Collectively, the contracts reached nearly $700 million, numbers so high that the clause forced Marvel to release them. It wasn't a negotiation, it was a handover. What looked like a minor legal detail in 2019 has now become the dagger at Marvel's throat. This wasn't actors betraying Marvel. It was Disney's own leadership prioritizing Star Wars at Marvel's expense. And the true cost of that decision, that's only just beginning to be felt. Once the contracts leaked, the betrayal became undeniable. This wasn't just about actors moving from one Disney property to another. This was about Marvel's biggest stars being given golden parachutes while the MCU was left scrambling. The numbers tell the whole story, and they're staggering. Brie Larson, once marketed as Marvel's next phase leader, secured a package worth around $15 million upfront, plus a 2.5% cut of net profits across the new Star Wars trilogy. More importantly, her deal included script consultation rights, a level of creative input she never had while filming Captain Marvel. Sebastian Stan, long rumored to play a young Luke Skywalker, closed on a contract valued near $80 million. And this wasn't just for acting. He was given a co-executive producer credit on the first film and an option to direct the third installment of the trilogy. That kind of leverage is almost unheard of in blockbuster filmmaking, especially for actors crossing over from another franchise. Chris Pratt signed the largest deal of the three. His contract is estimated at $95 million across multiple films, with built-in bonuses tied to merchandise sales. Insiders say Pratt's character has already been mapped out as a centerpiece of the trilogy's promotional push, from toy lines to theme park attractions. Together, these deals totaled nearly $700 million. But what really shattered trust inside Marvel wasn't the money. It was the clause buried in those contracts. Each actor was granted a built-in opt-out from all future MCU obligations. In other words, once they stepped into Star Wars, Marvel legally lost them. No cameos, no future Avengers reunions, no surprise crossovers. For Marvel's writers and producers, that clause was devastating. Entire scripts had to be rewritten. Storylines planned for Phase 6 were either delayed or quietly shelved. Fans noticed actors disappearing from promo art, interviews suddenly canceled, and rumors spreading that Marvel was running out of viable talent. And well, that's the betrayal at the core of this saga. Disney didn't just spend $700 million to revive Star Wars, it used that money to strip Marvel of its crown jewels. For Marvel Studios, the most painful part of this saga wasn't just losing stars, it was how it happened, completely behind their backs. Insiders confirm that Kevin Feige, the architect who spent over a decade building the MCU into a $29 billion juggernaut, wasn't even notified until after the Star Wars contracts were finalized. That detail alone left industry observers stunned. How could the head of Marvel be locked out of negotiations that directly gutted his own franchise? The answer lies in Disney's corporate hierarchy. Bob Iger personally authorized Lucasfilm's approach, reportedly under pressure from investors, to revive Star Wars theatrical releases after Rise of Skywalker flopped and multiple projects were abandoned. Marvel, in Iger's eyes, could survive on autopilot. But Star Wars, battered by critical backlash and dwindling box office, needed a lifeline. That lifeline came at Marvel's expense. By the time Feige was informed, Lucasfilm had already begun pre-production. Brie Larson was scanned in Jedi robes. Sebastian Stan had gone through motion capture testing for his new role. Chris Pratt was photographed in early costume fittings. Even toy prototypes featuring their characters were already being circulated internally. This wasn't an early conversation, it was a done deal. Marvel's reaction was chaos. Scripts had to be rewritten, Phase 6 slates reshuffled, and marketing teams forced to quietly pull actors from promotional material. Some projects were put on hold indefinitely, insiders saying at least 2 films have been scrapped entirely. The sudden vacuum of star power left Marvel scrambling to reconfigure its future around secondary characters and untested faces. And well, this is where the sense of betrayal cut deepest. To Marvel's leadership, it wasn't just that their stars left, it was that Disney itself facilitated the exit. Lucasfilm and Marvel may both live under the Disney umbrella, but in practice, this was one division raiding another. What was once called synergy had turned into open cannibalization. Marvel's leaders weren't just blindsided, they were undermined. And for fans, it revealed a truth Disney had tried to hide. Even inside the Mouse House, not all franchises are equal. The betrayal might have been engineered in boardrooms, but the fallout was felt in real time, by fans. And once the news of Marvel stars crossing into Star Wars leaked, the reaction was immediate, global, and impossible for Disney to control. On Reddit, Concept art showing Brie Larson wielding a dual-phased lightsaber in ceremonial white robes shot to the top of fan forums within hours. Threads speculating on Sebastian Stan as a Skywalker-type figure exploded, many pointing to his uncanny resemblance to a young Mark Hamill. Chris Pratt, once criticized for leaning too heavily into Marvel's humor, suddenly found fans embracing him as the perfect Mandalorian-style rogue. Then came the petitions. Within weeks, more than 250,000 fans signed online campaigns demanding that Disney confirm the castings and move forward with the trilogy. TikTok rumors fueled the frenzy, with leaked details about character names and early set designs racking up millions of views. Marvel's silence only added fuel. Every day the studio failed to address the situation, the narrative tilted further towards Star Wars. And well, the hashtags told the story. Star Wars Save Cinema and Free the Avengers began trending on X. Fans weren't just celebrating the new trilogy. They were openly framing it as a rescue mission from Marvel's decline. For longtime audiences, this wasn't betrayal. It was liberation. Meanwhile, Marvel's own PR machine looked broken. Posters were quietly swapped to remove actors who were already locked into Star Wars. Interviews with cast members were abruptly canceled. At one major convention, insiders say Marvel executives deliberately avoided questions about the new trilogy, even as Lucasfilm's booth next door was buzzing with excitement. The fan base drew the line. Marvel was now being seen as a content factory, churning out projects without passion. Star Wars, at least with this reboot, was being painted as the franchise returning to myth, legacy, and cinema. The backlash wasn't just loud, it was celebratory. For many fans, the betrayal of Marvel was the rebirth of Star Wars. While fans were rallying behind the Star Wars revival, Disney's larger financial picture was only getting worse. The betrayal didn't just sting on a creative level, it exposed how fragile the empire had already become. Start with the numbers. Disney's stock has been called a lost decade by analysts, sitting near $100 a share in 2015 and still hovering around that level in 2025. For investors, that's 10 years of standing still, while competitors like Netflix and Amazon expanded. The pressure on Bob Iger wasn't just about storytelling, it was about Wall Street demanding results. Then look at the box office. Snow White, billed as a reimagining of a timeless classic, opened to just $43 million on a production budget north of $270 million. That's not just underperforming, that's catastrophic. The Marvels also struggled, with global returns that couldn't match the combined cost of production and promotion. Even Ant-Man Quantumania, once seen as a guaranteed crowd-pleaser, left theaters with disappointing numbers. For a studio that once made billion-dollar blockbusters routine, these kinds of flops are a glaring red flag. Merchandise sales tell the same story. Since Endgame, Marvel characters introduced in later phases have seen a 37% drop in toy sales. Retailers reported stagnant shelves for newer heroes while older Avengers merchandise still moved. And theme parks mirrored that trend. Avengers Campus, designed as Marvel's showcase attraction, is facing shorter wait times and weaker attendance. In contrast, Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge continues to pull multi-hour lines despite no major theatrical release since 2019. And while these aren't just random setbacks, they paint a picture of a studio losing momentum. Fans no longer trust Marvel projects as must-see. Families are skipping overpriced remakes. Investors are losing patience, which is why the $700 million Star Wars betrayal hits harder. Instead of fixing Marvel's problems, Disney essentially cannibalized it to revive another struggling property. The collapse wasn't caused by the betrayal simply made clear just how deep the cracks already ran. If the $700 million Star Wars coup showed fans how Disney betrayed its actors, the legacy battles revealed how it betrayed its creators. Because while Disney celebrates Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Black Widow on screen, behind the scenes it was fighting legal wars to erase the very people who imagined them in the first place. In 2023 and 2024, the estates of Steve Ditko, Don Heck, and Gene Colan, the architects behind Marvel's most iconic heroes, filed claims to reclaim partial rights. Disney's response was blunt. These men were work for hire, meaning the company owned everything. The outrage was immediate. Even within Hollywood, critics called it tone-deaf and predatory. How could the studio that built an empire on these characters turn around and deny the families who created them any ownership? And well, the backlash was loud. Scarlett Johansson publicly supported the estates. Edward Norton and other veterans added their voices. The industry press framed it as a creator's revolt, exposing Disney as more concerned with protecting IP than honoring legacy. Eventually, settlements were reached, families compensated, acknowledgments updated. But by then, the damage was done. Disney looked like it was fighting to strip history instead of preserving it. As if that wasn't enough, another revelation hit. Disney executives were quietly authorizing AI scans of their actors. Officially called legacy continuity insurance, it meant performers like Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany were digitally captured so Disney could legally reuse their likeness long after contracts expired, or even after their careers ended. For the accountants, it was insurance. For the actors, it felt like replacement. You weren't irreplaceable anymore. You were a digital file. Compare that with Lucasfilm's Star Wars pitch. Instead of AI scans and legal fights, actors were promised producer credits, script approval, and creative control. It wasn't just money, it was respect. For stars already frustrated by Marvel's conveyor belt approach, the difference was night and day. This was the second betrayal. Disney didn't just lose control of its talent, it lost the trust of its own legacy. By the time the dust settled, Lucasfilm wasn't just celebrating a casting win, it was preparing the foundation of an entirely new era. Insiders call it the Skywalker Renewal Initiative, a trilogy set to launch in 2026 that isn't chained to the failures of the sequels, but instead positioned as a spiritual reboot of the franchise. And at the center of it all, Marvel's former heroes. Brie Larson will headline as the White Flame, a force-channeling rebel whose powers threaten to destabilize both the Empire and the fragile Republic. Early concept art shows her wielding a dual-phase lightsaber, dressed in ceremonial Jedi white, a stark contrast to her Marvel branding as Captain Marvel. Sebastian Stan, long rumored by fans as the perfect young Luke Skywalker, will instead play Marcos, a cloned Jedi experiment who carries Luke's memories but can't prove his own existence. Chris Pratt has signed on as Solace Vane, a rogue operative tied to Mandalorian history, positioned as the trilogy's rugged anti-hero. And well, the fan reaction has been nothing short of explosive. Leaked promo art on Reddit generated thousands of comments within hours. TikTok edits imagining Stan as a Skywalker figure went viral overnight. Petitions demanding that Disney officially reveal Larson's Jedi role crossed 250,000 signatures. For once, the buzz wasn't about complaints or fatigue, it was about excitement. Meanwhile, Marvel was left exposed. Phase 6 projects were forced to be restructured, with at least 2 titles rumored to be shelved entirely after the actors' exits. Promotional material quietly removed faces once touted as the franchise's future. Fans noticed the silence, interpreting it as confirmation that Marvel had lost its brightest stars. For Disney, the optics couldn't be clearer. Star Wars was being rebuilt around respect, myth, and legacy. Marvel was being left with recasts, rewrites, and the shadow of its former glory. This wasn't just a casting shift, it was the declaration of a new hierarchy inside Disney. Star Wars rising, Marvel fading. When you look at the full picture, it's clear this wasn't the Avengers betraying Marvel. It was Disney betraying itself. By greenlighting a $700 million Star Wars raid, Bob Iger effectively sacrificed Marvel to save another fading franchise. Kevin Feige was left sidelined, Phase 6 derailed, and the very actors who once carried the MCU are now being marketed as the saviors of a galaxy far, far away. And well, the message is unavoidable. For Marvel, the illusion of control is gone. The stars are choosing respect, creative power, and legacy over contracts and conveyor belts. For Star Wars, it's a rebirth. For Disney, it's a civil war of its own making. The Avengers didn't just jump ship, they exposed the Empire's weakest link. And the question now isn't whether Star Wars can rise again, it's whether Marvel can even survive without them.